with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, October 25th, 2021. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Marcia, Chatelain, author of Franchise, The Golden Arches in Black America. Meanwhile, it's Infrastructure Week, Part 2, probably. The second deadline to vote on infrastructure set by Democratic leadership is October 31st, I think. It's fast approaching. And Manchin and Sinema's demands have become a bit clearer, but there are still a ways to go. Manchin is expressing concern over expanded Medicare benefits, which Bernie says it's staying in, so there could be an impasse there. And Sinema is holding fast on no increased tax rates for the wealthy and corporations. But in a twist, now she could be on board for the much less structural billionaires tax? I'm as confused as anyone, and just so people are aware, Medicare benefits on the chopping block, that expansion, that's political suicide, and I'm speaking the language to Democrats, the only one they seem to listen to. The Supreme Court has again refused to immediately block Texas's near abortion ban. They're just gonna wait a few weeks, scheduling arguments for November 1st. What could go wrong? More documents are being revealed as a result of the Facebook whistleblower, which show the company repeatedly refused to heed calls for more action on misinformation in groups like QAnon from its own employees. And speaking of QAnon, Rolling Stone is reporting that the January 6th insurrectionists participated in, quote, dozens of meetings with members of Congress and White House officials ahead of the day, including Lauren Boebert, Louis Gohmert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, and Paul Gosar, who reportedly offered the attempted insurrectionists a blanket pardon ahead of the day. And lastly, in Sudan, the military has seized power and taken Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok captive in an apparent coup. Thousands of protesters took to the street, but internet and phone lines were severely disrupted, likely an attempt by the military to get in the way of protests and demonstrations. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Sam is out today, although he will be coming to you from the past for a pre-recorded interview. He will be conducting the interview today, so you'll still get your dose of Sam. Not sure why you'd be interested in that when you have the Majority Report.
People are going through withdrawals at this point.
Exactly. But I mean, they don't know any better. They're used to him, and so soon I'll wake you all out of this spell that you've been put under by all the ums and ahs. Not that I haven't picked a little bit up of that myself. It's stunning how much I've picked up of that. And here are the tranches that we're going to get into today, including this clip of Ro Khanna here. So Representative Ro Khanna has been one of the more forceful progressives in the media, calling out Sinema and Manchin, and I think appreciated it. I think a lot of people here have appreciated it, because while it's a delicate situation, you still need the truth to be communicated with the public. And Ro Khanna has done that quite effectively. Here he is with Chris Wallace discussing this new development that Senator Sinema is, for some, I should call her that, right?
She's sensitive about that.
Because she is sensitive about that, exactly. Representative Congresswoman Sinema, just kidding, Senator Sinema, She's apparently on board for this billionaires tax instead of any increase on corporations and the wealthy in terms of tax rates. Even though she voted against the Trump tax cuts, now she's against repealing them in order to pay for these new programs. But Kana points all of this out in a conversation with Chris Wallace.
Wealthy Americans, those making more than $400,000, and on corporations, there is suddenly talk of a wealth tax on about 700 billionaires. Are you willing to vote for that without any real testing or vetting?
I do think a wealth tax makes sense, Chris, and as I mentioned, I think last time I was on, it would be paid largely by people in my district, Silicon Valley billionaires. Our wealth has gone up 40% during the pandemic, $11 trillion of market cap in our area. They can afford to pay a wealth tax. But I guess my question for Senator Sinema is, she voted against the Trump tax cuts, and I just don't understand why she's not willing then to raise some of the rates back to what they were before the bill she voted against was, and she hasn't explained it to anyone.
But that was then. That's when we weren't in power. And now that we're in power, I have to wield it on behalf of the people that pay my bills.
And let's be real, it didn't need her vote, so it wasn't even really a question. If it needed her vote, maybe it would have been a different story.
Exactly. It's another example of why you can't trust where everybody votes, right? It's not a window to the soul. Yes, we had this conversation about Medicare for all, I recall, earlier in the year.
I like Chris Wallace. Like, you'd support a billionaire's tax without any vetting? Like, yes. Absolutely, 100% of the time, without even reading past the first line. Like, this is a billionaire's test? Yes.
Because in a healthy society, billionaires should not exist, but they do. And so a small tax on their extra capital gains, it might even be what's liquid, is certainly something I would say yes to in 2 seconds without any vetting. But this is just like a reminder of how limited our politics are here. This is, of course, a part of Elizabeth Warren's idea, right? It's downstream from her wealth tax concept. And that's fine as a supplement. But the fact that Sinema is embracing this goes to show that those kinds of proposals, you could call them technocratic, are very limited. And a comprehensive tax code that goes after the wealthy directly and under a large tent is a lot scarier to people, which is why Sinema is in favor of this. And it's not even going to raise a lot of money. Estimates show that this billionaire tax will only raise a couple billion over 10 years. So it also sheds light on how much of this pay-for obsession is complete BS. We knew this already, but the veil with which the veil that Sinema hides behind is that everything needs to be paid for. Same with Manchin. This billionaire tax raises a lot less money than anything than repealing a lot of the Trump tax cuts would. So this is, I think, illustrative in a variety of ways. But I'm not picking on Warren here, but you can see the fork in the road between a kind of Sanders-like politics and a Warren-like politics here. And these are the kinds of proposals that get floated and that get approved when you just try to make well-intentioned tweaks to the system and ones that play well, right? It's not going to have any substantive effect. And because you have conservative Democrats like this who are insisting on these pay-fors, and there are a lot of conservative Democratic senators who are hiding behind Sinema and Manchin, like Mark Warner, who are happy to have them take the public heat, but actually oppose these kinds of things behind the scenes. We're not going to get a lot of the programs that we want. I mean, the climate provision has been whittled down to almost nothing because Joe Manchin has demanded that it be gone. And there are a lot of things that hang in the balance currently. We're unsure how it's going to play out, but this is where we're at. You can't even, in today's Senate, when the Democrats control it, you can't even repeal the Trump tax cuts. And again, it is a failure of the Biden administration and the Democratic Party to not have been marketing this from the beginning as a way to repeal the Trump tax cuts. Putting Trump in the title and drumming up that negative partisanship would have done wonders for this. And now Sinema and Manchin are just running the show.
We see it with the way that they say, certain Democrat will say, it's a shameful that Republicans are stopping in front of this measure still, was as they control Congress. Like, it doesn't work. Yeah,
there's nothing to hide behind. And so these kinds of things, and it's the same reason that Sinema could vote for vote against the Trump tax cuts and now support upholding them.
And it really is like the difference between Biden and FDR, and the FDR, like, hate me, like, whatever, like, I don't care if you guys don't support me, the economic royalists, as he called them. Biden, it is, like, people say that it was overinterpreted, the nothing will fundamentally change, but it wasn't. It was, he was speaking from the heart there, and whatever context you want to add to it, that fundamentally is what he meant.
Do you think that those think pieces about him being the next FDR might have been a little premature?
I think they were a currying favor.
Well, I would happen to agree. All right, folks, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, you will be blessed by Sam Seder and this wonderful interview with Marcia, Chatelain, author of Franchise: The Golden Arches in Black America. We will be right back. But first... Oh, I'm reading advertisements today. Yes, I am. So your home should show off what makes you, well, you, right? Joybird offers modern, customizable furniture for every space, available in a variety of vibrant, durable fabric options. And Joybird's fall sale is here. Now, I've said this before. I have seen Joybird's furniture on advertisements online. I'm moving soon, and I want to get some Joybird furniture, so I'm going to be taking advantage of this for sure, because it's really beautiful, the furniture itself. Choose from over 18,000 customization options, or browse curated collections to find the perfect piece for your style. With Joybird's protection plan, your upholstery and leather pieces will always look as good as new. Joybird is committed to creating quality furniture and a more sustainable future. Pieces are made using responsibly sourced materials, free of harmful chemicals. Through partnerships with groups like One Tree Planted, Joybird is helping conservation efforts. With Joybird, you get quality craftsmanship, stain and scratch resistant fabrics, and limited lifetime warranty. Joybird stands by its quality with their 90-day returns, and if it's not everything you hope for, send it back. Now, look, I have seen the quality firsthand. We mentioned that there's a store where you can see Joybird pieces here in Brooklyn. Not super close, but you can walk through there. It's a part of a mall complex, and they are absolutely beautiful. I've been coveting and have had bookmarked a Joybird piece, and this fall sale is a perfect opportunity, including the usage of the Majority Report code. So create a space that brings you joy with Joybird. Visit joybird.com/majority and get 30% off your purchase. That's 30% off at joybird.com/majority. So I absolutely will be checking that out in the near future. Now, this is the moment we've all been waiting for. I never thought this day would come, but is your butt clean enough to sit on the couch naked? No? Get a Tushy, the modern bidet that attaches directly to your toilet in under 10 minutes. Now, Sam has talked at length about how much he loves Hello Tushy, or Tushy, and how it's changed his life, and I believe him. The Tushy is the modern bidet for people who poop. Just poop, wash, and pat dry. The Tushy bidet washes your bum with water for a better clean than toilet paper, and washing with water is less irritating and more soothing for you anyway. The Tushy bidet is easy to install and attaches to the toilet in under 10 minutes. No electricity or plumbing needed. Using a Tushy bidet reduces your toilet paper by 80%, saving you money. It's eco-friendly and stylish. So everyone wants to save money. The Tushy is a way to invest in yourself and save you money in the future. So start washing with a Tushy bidet for a better clean. Go to hellotushy.com/majority to get 10% off plus free shipping. This is a special offer for our viewers and listeners at hellotushy.com/majority for 10% off. And you buy and install your Tushy, show it off, tag at hellotushy on Instagram. It's a great way to post that butt picture that you've always been wanting to post and yet make it comedic. Right? No one wants to look like they're thirsty. This is a way to make it a lot more tongue-in-cheek. So again, you can tag at hellotushy on Instagram. Go to hellotushy.com/majority to get 10% off plus free shipping. All right, folks. Here is Sam's interview.
We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. And joining me now is Marcia Chatelain. She is a professor of history and African American studies at Georgetown University, author of Franchise, The Golden Arches in Black America. Marcia, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So let's just start with, this is, and we should say that the book tracks, I guess you could say, the rise of black capitalism as a response by different sectors of society to the civil rights movement in the 60s in many respects. What first drew you to McDonald's as opposed to any other example or illustration of this dynamic?
Well, I wanted with Franchise to achieve two things. One, engage in a more nuanced conversation than the ones that I was currently hearing in the food justice movement about race, health disparities, and food access, something that was moving away from the discourse that Black people were either ignorant or irresponsible in the way they fed themselves and their children, and they manifested that by consuming fast food. I wanted to interrupt that discourse. But the other thing that I wanted to really think about is the ways that in McDonald's entering Black communities immediately after Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, the ways that McDonald's in some parts of Black America had replaced the state, or I should say, from my perspective, what the state should be doing in providing this idea that a McDonald's could provide the economic stability, could provide the first jobs, could double as the senior center, could be the place where kids play after school. What did it mean for a fast food restaurant to have so much outsized impact in Black communities? And how did we get there? And as the book unfolds, and the book is, talking about the 1960s, but I think in many ways is so relevant today when we think about the responses to racial injustice from the corporate sector.
And we should say, that when we talk, we will get there in a moment, but the response of having businesses do what is desperately needed, or at least attempt to do what is desperately needed in many of these communities, is sort of like the perfect encapsulation of a neoliberal project here, where the market is going to take care of these things. But I just want to start on that first part about interrupting that question of nutrition and of McDonald's in these in Black communities, and that concept of like food deserts in some respect. What was it about that conversation that you felt like needed interrupting? That it was too limited and not, or
it was like super judgy kind of racist. It was this idea that very well-intentioned and well-meaning people would say things like, if only people knew about growing and making kale, then we could actually, disrupt rates of hypertension and diabetes. And I think the two things about fast food that are often not acknowledged in these conversations, whether they come from the public health sector or the social justice sector, is that one, fast food is a practical choice for many Americans because it is cheap, because it is a lot of fuel very fast, because it's perfect if you're working 2 or 3 jobs. But more than anything else, that every relationship we have to food has to be nurtured. There has to be an introduction of the food. There's nothing kind of natural about this type of affinity that we often place between poor people, particularly poor people of color, and fast food, that this is a relationship that has to be structured. And I think that a lot of conversations around food justice and access, they'll say, well, there's no grocery stores. Okay, this is great. But once people have all this fresh food, can they pay their utility bills? Do they have time to prepare food? Where are their kids? Are they worried about them? Where are the elderly in this community? And so I just wanted us to take a step back, away from the suggestion that if everyone had access to what we call good or quality or healthy food, then we would eradicate these problems that are based on diet, instead of looking at the larger structures like capitalism that will ultimately undermine our best efforts unless we start to think about where structures appear.
And I think, I think there's also a specific role that at the very least there was an attempt for this institution, I guess, of fast food to play in a lot of these communities. That was sort of, I guess, theoretically the idea on some level, and maybe we'll get to, to what extent they're playing that role. But let's go back to where we were. Let's do you give a sort of a history, a slight history of the development of fast food. Mm-hmm. Tell us that so that we have the context in which, what a shift it was in the wake of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King in 1968, that era to move fast food into Black communities.
So in the early 1960s, fast food, particularly fast food franchising, had such a frenzy in the United States. Everyone wanted to replicate the success of McDonald's, which was the first publicly traded fast food company. McDonald's grows from Southern California and expands in highways and bedroom communities and suburbs. And Ray Kroc, who would create the franchise system that we have today, he says that McDonald's grows up in the suburbs. And suburbs means something in the early 1960s. But by 1968, two things are happening in the family.
White,
yes. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the kind of audience that gets what I mean, but I'm going to say it means white people. It means white people who have disposable income.
And
white
who
people
fled the cities.
And who have fled the cities because of what they perceive as urban decline, but it's about creating distance from particularly Black people, but also moving capital out of the cities. And so by the late 1960s, two things are happening. One, in some parts of the city where there is McDonald's, there is a big demographic shift from white to Black. And some white franchisees of McDonald's don't want to do business in those communities anymore, especially after many summers of racial unrest. The second thing that's happening is that after King's assassination, there are some real questions among the civil rights establishment as to what's our next move? Where's the pivot? We have seen great disappointment from the legislative and court victories since the 1950s. Schools are not integrated equally. We don't have equal access to public accommodations. And none of these things matter because there's such a wealth gap between Black and white in America that people who had been very much dedicated to the nonviolent struggle were saying, maybe we need to start thinking about economics in a different way, not just the boycott, but getting a piece of the action. And so it's this perfect storm after King's assassination, because the corporate sector is seeing that they need to be responsive to the fact that they've excluded so many people. And then the civil rights movement, establishment, is actually moving away from King's vision of thoughtful analysis of poverty and capitalism and saying, if we're not going to get our fair share, maybe we start opening businesses. And at the same time, the franchise model is being endorsed by, everyone as this kind of get rich quick scheme. So it's this like perfect moment. I mean, it's so much like today in so many ways, where we have this kind of speculative economy. We also have this incredibly this second Gilded Age. And then we have these corporations and other institutions that are trying to respond to racial unrest. And it comes in the form of, we know the answer, McDonald's and Black communities.
So, all right, wait. So I want to take those two ends of the equation, I guess, which would be, the sort of corporate America's response to, we have multiple major urban centers, going through uprisings and destruction of property, and then in the wake of the death of Martin Luther King, a shift within at least some elements of the civil rights movement to less of a critique of capital and more of a sense of like, well, maybe we need to get power within the context of the system rather than talk about changing it. So from the corporate side, I think you raised the issue of disaster capitalism. Like this is
100%.
This is the intention is less about what can we do for racial relations in this country and more about how can we exploit an opportunity that exists. And also perhaps, I mean, the instance of Jones, I believe his name was Ronald Jones. Like that, like how much? So tell the story of Ronald Jones, and then also so there's like these two elements I think that you talk about is the disaster capitalism situation where it's like we can move in here and get some
market share,
and then the other part is maybe this is also like we can get some protection on one flank or another.
So, right. So after King's assassinated, Roland Jones is a manager at a McDonald's in Washington, D.C., and he is seeing D.C., particularly the U Street corridor, going up in flames. And he is asked by McDonald's to kind of go to Chicago to recruit the first Black franchise owner. And it's this perfect convergence of how disaster capitalism works, right? You have the initial shock event of King's assassination, one of, a number of political assassinations that happens in the 60s. You have the deep confrontations between everyday people and the police, right? The kind of law and order stuff that is going to unfold. And then you have this corporation that is trying to protect its restaurants, not just because it's their restaurants, but they own the property in which those restaurants are built. McDonald's is one of the largest landowners in the United States because they own their real estate. And so you also have these white franchise owners who are doing business that is either in Black communities or too close, and they're saying, we don't want this. And so this is a process that is like mirrors so much of the horrors of the real estate sector, where there's like white flight, the movement of capital, and the movement of tax dollars. But McDonald's is not just saying we want to respond to the needs of the Black community. They are also going to be supported by a Nixon administration that is giving federal funds for minority-owned businesses. And at this time, franchises are considered small businesses. And they also will have the endorsement of major civil rights organizations that I think are exhausted and irritated by the failures that they saw throughout the 60s, whether it was on racial integration or the war on poverty. And they're going to start talking about business ownership. And this is the place in which Black self-determination will be realized. And so you have these kind of two impulses. And the thing about business as a strategy for either racial inclusion or to suppress racial unrest, it captivates people on the left and the right. Because people on the left will say, well, I guess Black self-determination and Black power is important, so owning your business is good. And then people on the right love this because if you build Black communities, no one will say, wait a second, but there's a white community here that's getting more tax dollars, more infrastructure, better quality housing, and better schools. It's this desire to build within hyper-segregated environments and keep everyone quiet.
I want to take that last part second here and go back, because I was surprised about the Nixon administration offering this, because in many respects they were running on the idea that, like, hey, we got a problem with the black people in this country, and we can't quite say it exactly like that, but the idea that they would then extend these small business loans. Like, what was behind that? I mean, what, like, was that a was that out of, on some level, out of fear by the Nixon administration? Was it out of some type of lobbying effort for businesses that are like, well, wait a sec, this is, I mean, that dynamic reminds me a little bit of the for-profit college business, where it is, we're going to have government essentially fully subsidizing, like, and by I mean fully subsidizing these for-profit universities. 95% of their revenue comes from government loans. And more often than not, black people, particularly black women, end up being the conduit of that money sort of passing through to these companies. I mean, was that like what was going on here? This dynamic of, this is a way for us to sort of give money to business in this country and to have it sort of just, pass through the black community. And so that we have, sort of everybody bought into this notion of this sort of government largesse, as opposed to, like, let's build schools.
Or let's distribute taxes. This happens a little bit earlier, and it kind of has its like high point with Nixon. So prior to King's assassination, he writes a letter to the Johnson administration, and he says, hey, these war on poverty funds that you earmarked for early child education, why are they going to business development? Why is this becoming part of the vision of how you eradicate poverty? And so this idea of allowing Black people access to own a business, this is a response as early as 65 to Watts. It's this kind of like Ford Foundation meets, Office of Economic Opportunity way of envisioning. One, I think the restoration of like patriarchy. If Black men own something, then they would be less likely to destroy it in their neighborhood. So there's some logics about ownership. And then the second part of it is that, corporations like Xerox and IBM, they are kind of leading the way in what we would call diversity strategies today. And they're seeing some possibility of government subsidies for doing business with what will later be determined minority-owned businesses. And then there's a designation women-owned businesses. So all of this is to say that, like, this idea that you can get people to have more respect or value their community if they own something in it has long been a response to when there is this moment. But what I always find fascinating about it is that people do not take to the streets because they don't own businesses. They do it because the police have killed someone and there's no accountability. They do it because there's nowhere to live safely. They do it because, there are all of these material conditions that aren't being met. So all of this is to say Nixon enters the chat because, in 68, it's kind of weird to think about it. The Republican Party has completely shifted its strategy and its audience, but they still have a few Black voters.
Right.
They still have a few people who are party loyalists. They still have people like Jackie Robinson who are willing, to try to fight till the end for the Republican Party. And what they have are a lot of Black men celebrities who are endorsing Nixon because of this platform. You have Wilt Chamberlain, you have James Brown, you have all of these people who say, like, okay, Nixon is probably garbage, but I'll mess with him if he's going to give us some business loans. And this is important for Nixon in order to solidify some key places that we would call swing states now.
And we should also say, too, I would imagine that there is a significant part of the liberal mindset that is coming out of, like, the Moynihan report.
900%.
And that is this notion of, like, if we can somehow change the culture of Black people, and part of that would be like the idea that we have these entrepreneurs in Black communities and have people invested in their own success. And I would also imagine, too, like, around that time is a big push against this idea of more social reform. We're coming out of Medicare, and we're watching like the Powell memo. I mean, that's generated at that time. There's a real sort of concern about government actually like sort of providing
care for people. And there's something more palpable about a small business loan versus direct cash payments to the poor. And so, that has always been an evergreen part of American politics. And so, so if you get kind of Black business to operate and to work, then you can undermine all of the social safety networks that everyday people will use and more people will use. And, Nixon, I interviewed the son of a guy named Brady Keyes, who starts a series of fried chicken restaurants in the 1960s. He was on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And his son said to me, he said, my dad wasn't a Republican, but Richard Nixon called him up and said, open up one of your restaurants in Cleveland so that when I go on a campaign stop, I can point to Black voters on what I did. And this guy got upwards to $9 million in federal and private funds to get into fast food franchising. And so, these types of anecdotes start to stand in for actually like real substantive policy, because this is a dazzling, example of what the Nixon administration is willing to do for Black people.
And I'm also fascinated about the, about Frank Abernathy, who followed Martin Luther King in the Southern Baptist Leadership Convention, and
the Southern Christian,
Southern Christian, sorry, and he was more, I think, explicitly for a socialist agenda than King was. I mean, what was the, not necessarily the totality, but where were the different sort of forces within the Black civil rights movement as to this as a solution to Black empowerment?
Yeah, this is such an interesting moment. I've started doing some research for another book on this question of like what happens, April 5th, 68, when everyone's putting their head together about what's going to happen next. So King felt, and Ralph Abernathy were associates from the Montgomery bus boycott years. They were, they kind of grew up together in the movement, and he adored him. But, Abernathy is just saying kind of what is in his gut. King in his last year is talking against the Vietnam War. He's critiquing the war on poverty. He's talking about, militarism and materialism and racism as three evils. Like he is going out on a kind of a left junket by himself. And what alienated him from a lot of his colleagues was his anti-military stance, because so many African Americans during this period of time are making the case for civil rights based on their World War II participation. So he's kind of upsetting some of the people who had participated in the military, and his critique of capitalism is really layered, because he said, we did the boycotts, but what we're also doing is the labor struggle. And regardless of whether you're a laborer, like the sanitation workers he went to support in Memphis when he was killed, we all have to feel the pain somehow. And so he started a project through SCLC called Operation Breadbasket that Jesse Jackson was in charge of. And Jesse Jackson was doing this thing where he was pressuring businesses in Black communities to not only do better service, but to actually hire local people. And that will be his blueprint into the 70s and 80s that becomes corporate negotiation. So it isn't just everyone don't shop at the store, but don't shop at the store. And then how many Black lawyers are you going to hire? How many Black construction workers are you going to hire? And so what started as this idea of kind of economic accountability spins out into kind of corporate partnership that really loses kind of sight of, what King was really getting at. And that was the economic exploitation of workers. And so Ralph Abernathy is not considered as like elegant and as suave. People in the New York Times say that he's like totally vulgar and how dare he like try to be the next king. And he does things like he wears an armband that says, Mississippi goddamn, and everyone's like, King would never do that. He's just in the worst position ever because he will never be Martin Luther King, but he's more blunt and he says, this Black capitalism thing, it's not going to serve us. We need Black socialism. But even within a few years of him saying that, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference is also kind of partnering with some of the franchises. And a lot of people who graduate from the movement, they reappear in my book as franchise owners or supporters of Black McDonald's franchisees.
Was that just sort of like an exhaustion? Sort of like,
so.
I mean, because I'm also struck by around that time you write about the Black Panther Party I think it was in Oregon.
Portland, yeah.
Portland. They're exercising their power within that to sort of, force franchisees there to sort of share their largesse with the community. And there's all this sort of like attempts to exert power or to grow power or to build the community. And it feels like some people were just like, if you can't beat them, join them type of situation.
Or ask them for something. So there are these really precious years in the 1970s where McDonald's is trying to, on one hand, capitalize on the Black dollar and market to Black people, tell them they can come to McDonald's and, be themselves and try to be culturally relevant. And they're still trying to kind of draw a line of how many demands from local Black organizations they're going to actually indulge. And so when the Black Panther Party says, you have to give to our free breakfast program, you're here, we're here, the person refuses. And, there's this question of whether the Panther Party bombs the McDonald's. There's still a lot of questions about that. But, the issue is like, who are you going to be in our community? And the way that they address this is by having very structured understanding of what that is. It's giving to the United Negro College Fund. It's giving to the NAACP. It's showing that they have Black franchise owners. And, while McDonald's is becoming a fact of life in Black America, it's not the seamless process. It's a lot of people having questions about the structure of the business. Does it even matter if a McDonald's is Black franchised, if only one person becomes a millionaire? Like the quality of the experience, it's all up for grabs. And this is what I love about this period of time, because we know how the story ends, but the process and the questions that people ask, I think reminds us that, we don't have to concede to corporate power immediately, that there's a give and take in the whole process that I think that, we have to remind ourselves of.
Let's talk about where the story sort of ends or goes from there. So you have these federal funds that come in that essentially provide for the establishment of these franchises, McDonald's, but other fast food. Mm-hmm. And then what in the theory is what about what it's going to do for the community, or at least that's what is it that they're saying that's going to happen? And how long does it take to realize, wait a second, that's not happening? Or does it not happen?
Well, I mean, it's all trickle down economics. And it's this idea that if you have a Black franchise McDonald's in a community, then the person who franchises that location will engage in less employment discrimination. And so Black youth will have jobs, and those jobs will become the stepping stone for stable economic lives, that they will make a lot of money and donate to Black institutions. And here you have this thing that's taking care of people. By the early 70s, two things become clear. One, that the devastating kind of condition of business districts in predominantly Black areas allows McDonald's to make tons of money. And the second thing that becomes clear is even within a system that says it's going to create Black millionaires, those Black millionaires are still like aggrieved racial parties, which I think I did not write a book so that we could be like really sympathetic towards millionaires. And at the same time, it is really messed up the way that like you see these Black franchise owners who are bought in and they're still navigating a system in which, because they are Black, they know they could be making more, but they're not. And the weight of kind of what's going to happen to the community is falling on people who are running a fast food restaurant. And so I think by the early 70s, the racial disparity in the franchise opportunity system becomes very clear. By the 1980s, it also becomes very clear that these jobs are not a leverage. They are not just for teenagers, that we have a working poor that are dependent on fast food jobs for their basic needs, and that these jobs are insufficient. And so as the 80s are ramping up, you have more and more of these protests by people like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton through their organizations that are pushing for more Black franchise owners, but are not leveraging their political power to change the conditions of workers. And this is where I really get stuck, in the kind of speculative alternative history. What if the campaigns were about workers and the quality of their jobs, rather than this idea that the goal is to make more Black millionaires and their millions will trickle down to everyone else?
I mean, am I cynical in thinking that there was that wasn't a question, there wasn't just two questions there? Like the third option is that those people who were pushing for the development of those Black millionaires weren't just looking for the trickle down, but also as a way of enhancing the power of their organizations.
900%, because this is what helps the NAACP after the 1970s, because they're super struggling as an organization. They're being sued by a lot of the racists that they sued in the 50s and 60s. They're losing membership. They're losing kind of appeal to youth because of the growth of Black power and the disillusionment with civil rights organizations. And so they come up with a strategy called Fair Share that comes out of the Los Angeles branch. And that's the idea of selective boycott. They do it at Coors because Adolph Coors, says bananas things like, slavery wasn't that bad. It was kind of a good idea. And, all of these companies that are doing what companies do, they're targeting them, and their terms of negotiations open up the pathway for Black people in white collar and elite positions. For the most part, it enhances the deposits in white banks. It creates all sorts of contracts for Black insurance agencies and advertising agencies, but it never gets to the heart of the critical mass of workers in any of these industries.
It also feels to me that if I'm owning a franchise in really in any area to a certain extent, it's possible that my intentions are, I want to raise the wages of the within the community, but it seems to me that from a business standpoint, I'm not. It's not rocket science to take a bun and put it on here, and I don't want the wages to go up too much in this community. That it is actually not in my best interest for more businesses to be built around my McDonald's or whatever it is, because if there are more businesses here, then I'm going to have more competition for my labor, and so there's a everybody's got to eat. And so, I'm not, they're going to spend their money on their electric bill or their gas bill, and then they're going to buy food and maybe clothes, but I don't need a lot of business to be going on here for me to make my money when I'm in the business of selling low cost food.
Well, talk about all sorts of kind of perverse motivations, because on one hand, archetypically, the Black business owner has been the anchor of Black communities, since the 19th century. It was the guy who owned the funeral home, the family that owned the bank, when they were, when they were servicing Black consumers who had zero options, right? And then they were doing other things like lending money or establishing scholarships. This has not changed that much. But one of the things that I think is fascinating, after the George Floyd summer, all of these ridiculous calls for more Black businesses, I was so grumpy because I couldn't believe all of the bad ideas of the past were being recycled for this moment, in which I think that there's incredible clarity in movements, like abolish and defund, like Black Lives Matter, about what the terms of engagement are. But the response becomes, more Black creators on Etsy, or more Black furniture makers, or, 5% of contracts for this clothing company will come from Black designers. That's great. This does nothing to actually address any of the things that people are asking for, or demanding, or dying for. But this idea that the Black business can then do these things is also such a setup for failure. The majority of Black businesses in the United States do not employ anyone, are these kind of sole proprietor, one person, maybe one family setups. This idea that you're going to open all of these businesses and they'll be in the position to pay the living wage, to have really robust benefits, to invest in the community, it's not real. And this is where I start to think about, these franchise owners. Some of them made a lot of money, but, there was a recent lawsuit among 50 plus Black franchise owners against McDonald's. They're alleging the things that I write about in my book from the 70s, that there's this disparate way in which they have to operate. And the weight of doing businesses in the particular communities that they're often put in is also something that is kind of, not sustainable for their businesses. So if it's happening with a McDonald's franchise, how the hell is a Black-owned boutique or bookstore going to carry the weight of complete, structural racism as well as government negligence?
Well, can you talk a little bit about how those Black franchise owners are, what the nature of the lawsuits are, and like what the dynamics are that put them under the gun? Which, of course,
come on.
Well, yes, but I mean, but be explicit about that for us. But also, we should also say that to the extent that there's any of those people who do have designs on building up their community, that kind of pressure also decreases the opportunity for them to do that, even if we're not so jaundiced about their intentions to do so.
Absolutely. So what they allege is that McDonald's has been engaging in a practice in which when a Black franchise owner is to be assigned a store, they are assigned stores in predominantly Black areas that have a low economic base. And as a result, the carrying costs of doing business in those communities are unusually higher relative to their white peers who are often assigned in places in the suburbs and predominantly white areas. And one of the things that the franchise owners from the 70s would talk about is to say that we make more money than the white stores, but our carrying costs are higher because of security, usually taxes because they're in major urban areas, as well as the fact that Black franchise owners often inherited stores that were in poor condition and had a lot of broken equipment. McDonald's is also, it's not only a real estate company, it's also, an object lesson in supply chain. So if I franchise a McDonald's and you have a tomato farm and we're friends and I say, hey, can you give me a deal on tomatoes? I can't do that, right? There's certain suppliers and there's certain mechanisms, and there's also certain demands that a franchise owner has to meet. And so when things that are supposed to make fast food attractive are introduced, all-day breakfast, unlimited soda, Wi-Fi, touchscreens, the McCafe, all of those types of upgrades are the responsibility of the franchisee in order to be competitive and compliant. And Black franchisees will say, we can't do those things and still make money, or we can't do those things and still keep up with our rent payments. And so what they are saying is a lot of the things that we see in the real estate market, that there's redlining, that there is assignment and steering into certain communities. And as a result, that Black franchise owners are more vulnerable to losing their stores.
Where are we today on these kind of debates or questions? I mean, it sort of feels like we're not necessarily in a great place.
No, we are not. And, this is where I start wagging my finger at everyone. Folks, businesses, I guess, are fine. I guess someone can sell something and people can buy things in markets. I've already, excuse me, I've already given up the fact that I'm not going to win this fight against capitalism by saying that maybe we don't need markets. Okay, fine, we have markets. But markets should not be tied to the well-being and the viability of people. And so, we are still in the age of bad ideas. We're still in the age of Black-owned businesses are something that we put resources in, or the illusion of resources in, at the detriment or the expense of thinking about the fact that we actually have a robust public system to draw funds from, and we can provide people with the things that they need. You know, sometimes when I'm on the road with my book, someone will say, well, what do you think the solution is? And I'll say, I can answer all of these questions, right? Like, what do we do about racial injustice? This is where we start. Free college, Medicare for all, free childcare. Let's start there. These aren't even like the most radical of ideas. Let's start there. No one has to take diversity training. No one has to be more sensitive. I'm not going to even ask you to be less racist. I'm just going to ask for things that are not tied to employment, and also things that everyone can get so they can make decisions free and clear. Because one of the great dangers of thinking we can kind of start up or innovate our way out of racial injustice is that it's not only untrue, but then it makes people even more vulnerable to the whims of people who say, here's this, you know, shiny object. This is what is going to answer our questions. And it's a great strategy because it never forces us to say, wait a second, don't we have a robust public system in which these things can actually happen? So, you know, the sleight of hand continues. I think the grift continues. And we are, unfortunately, in this moment, both with the George Floyd summer and COVID-19, where I think the floodgates and the disaster capitalism, we already see it manifesting.
Indeed. Marcia Chatelain, the professor of history, African American studies at Georgetown, author. The book is Franchised, The Golden Arches in Black America. We'll put a link to that at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We are back. Wonderful interview that Sam conducted there. Always appreciate getting to... sorry, go on.
I'm a big fan of the final prescription that she gave at the end there. The free healthcare, free higher education, and childcare.
Yeah.
Simple.
Exactly. Before we head out, let's just check in on President Biden here. So, these, as I mentioned, it's Infrastructure Week 2.0. Biden is set to travel to Europe on Thursday to meet with Pope Francis and then go to the COP26. I forget exactly how you say it, in Glasgow. So he was asked here about the status of the infrastructure fight and whether or not he expects a vote this week. Here's what Biden had to say.
It went well. A few more things to work out, but it went well.
Do you think you'll have a plan before Wednesday?
With the grace of God and the goodwill of neighbors.
Do you want a deal by the time you leave for COP? Is that something you've expressed to Democrats?
That's my hope.
Do you expect a vote this week?
What do you think? I don't know.
We're asking you.
Are you concerned if you have to leave without your...
It'd be very, very positive to get it done before the trip. Thank you.
All right. Well, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what to make of it, but when you pair it with Manchin's current comments, he believes that there will be a deal on the, quote, conceptual framework of the package this week. Now, are Democrats going to vote to advance the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which has been waiting in the wings because it was supposed to be paired with the larger reconciliation package, which is now going to be significantly whittled down? Manchin is still saying that he's sticking to that $1.5 trillion figure arbitrarily, although behind the scenes, apparently, there's a little bit more flexibility there. I mean, my estimate is that's going to be around 1.8 trillion, which is insane.
Manchin also said he wanted the PRO Act and something like 4.5 trillion like several months ago. So he just says things.
Sometimes. Oh, he just says things, exactly. And it's arbitrary. And the idea that you can just like make a determination based on a number is ridiculous. But the fact that he's saying that publicly, that he believes there will be that framework, and the fact that Biden is also indicating a similar sentiment as he's set to leave for Europe at the end of this week on Thursday-ish, means that there's could be something that happens. A deal could be struck at some point, but it's going to be a shell of itself, and it already is a shell of itself. And Manchin and Sinema have run this show, and I think that's obvious for people, but they have been able to deliver for the people that provide them with campaign contributions, because there is a real chance that unless Bernie and progressives hold firm on Medicare benefit expansion for vision, hearing, and dental, that could be struck from the bill. And I wouldn't even vote on this without the entire bill agreed to, not just the framework, because there's still a lot of wiggle room there. But I'm not sure that with all of this external pressure, the Giant Paul can keep her caucus together on this. And certainly Schumer's not going to do anything in the Senate. So stay tuned. But that is all the time that we have for today. We will see you tomorrow, Peacock audience. But for those of you who are sticking around, we have an entire fun half filled with fun just for all of you. Matt, what's happening over on Left Reckoning?
Oh, Elias Cepeda, we talked about a couple of things. Colin Powell, remembering Colin Powell, talked about the issue teachers face. We also talked about actually Kyrie Irving a little bit, but in a way, kind of look just to I guess preview the conversation a little bit. I think Kyrie's absolutely wrong. Obviously, Jonathan Isaac also wrong, but at a certain point, you have to look at how this plays to the non-COVID fan or sports fan, the people who aren't sort of. And by which I mean a little bit glib, but like following the news terribly closely. And it's not Kyrie Irving's responsibility to get the pandemic under control. But we're also going to be talking about the...
well, we can touch on that when we talk
what's
about
going on.
What happened at Barclays Center over the weekend.
In the fun half here, yeah. So,
in the fun half.
But go subscribe to the YouTube channel, folks. Patreon.com/leftreckoning for all the for that Sunday conversation. But also, it's free to subscribe to YouTube.
Right. Definitely. Please do that and check out No McKee Show as well. Lots of stuff. No, I'm not even going to attempt it. Just Coffee .coop. Check out their site. Reminds me I need to get a little bit more cold brew from them. My favorite cold brew blend. We will also be taking your calls and reading your IMs. I already have seen a few messages about my ad raid. 646-257-3920. We will see you in the fun half.
Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Ooh.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're not paying.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
I think I might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up. Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
We are back. Welcome to the fun half, everybody. Let's read a few of these IMs. Swing for the Pences. Howdy, MR crew. The Soundproofist podcast just released an episode on Stop the Chop, the organizers against helicopter noise in NYC. A great look into how the 1% commutes and private corporations' profits can destroy public space. Happy Monday.
That sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
We should absolutely ban helicopter travel.
Yes, especially given like the news of the past 2 years.
Like, you don't get to opt out. Like, first of all, we've destroyed every metropolitan area in this country. New York, like, probably most famously in the power broker Robert Moses, the way we've just bulldozed things for freeways. But New York's actually
brilliant, though.
But New York's actually like survived better than a lot of other countries. You look at like what Kansas City looked like in like the 20s versus the 70s, and it looked better in the 20s. It's all parking lots in the 70s. So we destroyed the cities of this country for basically slightly wealthier people. You don't get to opt out of that stuff. To fly all over it, in my opinion. I mean, I don't know.
Do you remember when your Uber
really
app used to have like helicopters on it? Did you see that
briefly?
for a time
I remember
period?
that. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was traveling a lot for TYT, I would like take rides to and from the airport all the time, and like when I was at JFK or whatever, helicopters would come up. Should I put this on the company card?
What's now the MetLife building above is that Grand Central? Used to be the Pan American building. It advertised for jet setters like in the Don Draper sort of era, that you can fly from a helicopter from the top of that building to LaGuardia and skip all like the the peasants and stuff.
Isn't it amazing that there are people who watched Mad Men and took Don Draper's life as aspirational?
Oh, well, that was me at like age 19.
Okay, I understand it for young boys, but you watch that show, it's pretty obvious that he's fucking miserable.
Right, exactly.
And has no relationship with his
death.
children and is traumatized and can't get close to anybody.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he's great in pitches. Josh from Tucson, Emma reading the Hello Tushy ad is the best thing I've heard all month. It was the worst thing I did all month. Flound Diesel, perhaps tongue in cheek wasn't the best choice of words for the Tushy ad. Obviously. Chiggy, superb interview, F McDonald's / fast food capitalism. Alvenio Gracias, walk and chew gum, not exactly a great message to say let's deal with racism later. I don't know if that's...
No, I mean, no. I don't think that's what people are saying. I think actually, like, that's dealing with it and the severe effects of it, which are material and in terms of health and education, those sorts of things, immediate addressing of some of those harms. And then in terms of like the other stuff, then you can address it on a more material, equal playing field.
Yeah. All right, let's take a call or two. Calling from a 917 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Are the phones up, Matt? Oh, sorry, hold on, 917. Oh, 917.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's me.
Oh, hey, who's you?
Oh, hi. It's me, Alex from New York.
Alex from New York. Haven't heard from you in a bit.
I know. Shadow ban. Anyway.
Exactly.
I wanted to, before I give you the Fight Club members, I wanted to ask if you saw the thread yesterday about the woman named Amanda who was undercover MAGA for like a year.
I did not. What was it?
She went to all the meetings and rallies and says she's got a bunch of like recording devices on her, and gonna drop a bunch of stuff.
Ooh.
I don't know. I'm very excited.
I think.
I also made a laser eyes clip of you from last week.
Oh, you did? Did you tag me?
Yeah. Yeah, I tweeted at you.
All right, do it again, and I'll see it.
Right.
My notifications are just like so flooded that it's hard to. You know, I'm just so popular.
Ben Shapiro and Jimmy Dore.
Well, over the weekend, I had there was a bit of a coordinated effort. That's all I'll say.
Oh yeah. Oh no. Okay. Well, for today, I thought we'd get some old people.
Mm-hmm.
Chuck Schumer versus Richard Blumenthal.
It's good.
Yeah.
All right.
And Judge Jeanine and Maria Bartiromo.
Judge Jeanine and Maria Bartiromo.
Janine's rolling that.
You think so?
I don't think much of Maria Bartiromo's fighting capacity, to be honest.
Janine's a psychopath. Like, she's really.
Judge Jeanine is like she will go primal like immediately, I think.
Yeah, I mean that's I understand. I just think Bartiromo might be younger and might be a bigger person. That was what I was looking at.
But there's a large stature difference, then I might revise.
All right, Maria Bartiromo height. Not like, and who I saw, you know, she's 5'5", and Jeanine Pirro's 5'4", so actually not that different. And well, the age difference is 70 to 54, so I think I am taking Bartiromo, even though Janine's insane.
All right. And what was the other one? Schumer versus who?
Blumenthal. There's few people Schumer could win in a fight with, in my opinion.
Exactly.
As evidenced by the infrastructure negotiations.
I think that one's gonna be a draw.
Huh. Blumenthal's tall. Not that, I mean, again, it's not all about, but I like to get a visual of these people next to each other. But I think Jeanine versus I'm less certain. I mean, so maybe I'm just trying to be a little bit different by taking Bartiromo. But that was a good one. All right, appreciate it, Alex. Good hearing from you.
All right, you too. Take care.
Yep.
Bye.
I don't know.
Schumer's only 5'9", Blumenthal's 6-footer. So yeah, sorry, Chuck.
Calling from an 801 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 801.
Hi, this is Teak from Salt Lake.
Teak from Salt Lake. What's on your mind?
Well, actually, I feel like I wouldn't be too far out on a limb to guess that the majority report still has a somewhat favorable view of the DSA in general.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. So I actually recently, sorry, I'm a lot out of breath. I'm going uphill. Recently went and had a bunch of like custom-made rubber stamps with the DSA logo put on it, and I've been like making like sandwiches and kits for homeless people and whatnot,
nice.
And handing that out just as like a favor of goodwill. I went and bought a whole bunch more stamps, and I'm not looking for any money or anything, but if any of the Majority Report audience wants to do something similar, if they want to email me, I will mail them something, some packaging, some rubber stamps, stuff like that.
Sure.
Are you doing this? Are you doing this like within like as part of DSA?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, they aren't like it's all out of my pocket, but it is in association with my local chapter.
Okay, cool. I mean, that's the only thing is like I think it's cool what you're doing. I just think like I have the DSA involved if you're using the like branding of it, but that's cool.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, I wouldn't want to just be like, hey, I'm handing out product.
Yeah.
Right.
This thing.
Well,
for sure.
How can people reach out to you?
It's socialisthive@gmail.com. They can reach me there.
Socialist Hives?
Yeah, Socialist Hive.
HIVE.
Yep.
Great. All right, awesome. Cool. Thanks, Teak.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Have a good one.
I was getting ready to defend the DSA there.
I know. I was like rearing up for, oh boy. Yeah. Well, I hate the DSA, and here's why. Don't clip that. Don't clip that. I love what DSA has done, and especially in New York, incredibly effective. It varies based on like parts of the country, but overall, it's just very, I don't know. The people going after them are nitpicking themselves into oblivion.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're going to go after them, I hope you're like organizing strikes or doing some other work yourself beyond just critique, because critique, we've got that in spades.
Yes. Jay Scavioni says Blumenthal was a Marine.
Oh, okay.
Done. Done. Majority Report wardrobe coordinator. Oh no, did you burn Sam with your laser eyes? Is this now a bloody coup? Has Sam ummed his last ah? Little Mac. Madman Don is a cautionary tale I took very seriously many years ago. AGI, thank God. You was on the path to being him. I was on the path to being him. I don't know if that's possible, but
I think
being John Hamm's a bit hard.
I think so, but I also think like if you get in the right position, like you sort of become that. You sort of inhabit a role, and it becomes you. Like, I mean, I think of like if, say, like Google hired me straight out of grad school, and I didn't have like a period of like trying to find a job and stuff like that. If I just got like hired right up into Google, would I be as tech critical? I mean, I was already pretty critical then, and probably why I never would get hired by those places, because my resume is full of, and my blog is full of was full of critique. But yeah, I don't know. I think like if you get hired at like a marketing firm, you start making a lot of good money. You start not caring about the the sort of cautionary aspect of that.
Right. Yeah.
That's what the money's for. That's exactly
right. All right, let's turn to this this ad that I found here. Bradley, we're gonna do that. You got that? Okay, cool. So we are nearing the election time in Virginia. Specifically, the race has tightened a bit for the governorship between the Republican candidate Glenn Youngkin and Terry McAuliffe. Now, Youngkin is leaning into a lot of what we've seen the Republican Party do nationally, which is your kids are being indoctrinated, they're being masked and silenced and being indoctrinated, and you can use that as a proxy for your own anxiety. So Youngkin has chosen to dig up this voter, I believe she's in Fairfax, Virginia, for an ad for him to kind of cash in on this critical race theory stuff. Let's hear what she has to say, and then I'll tell you what she's actually referring to.
As a parent, it's tough to catch everything. So when my son showed me his reading assignment, my heart sunk. It was some of the most explicit material you can imagine. I met with lawmakers. They couldn't believe what I was showing them. Their faces turned bright red with embarrassment. They passed bills requiring schools to notify parents when explicit content was assigned. It was bipartisan. It gave parents a say, the option to choose an alternative for my children. I was so grateful. But then Governor Terry McAuliffe vetoed it twice. He doesn't think parents should have a say. He said that. He shut us out. Glenn Youngkin, he listens. He understands. Parents matter. Join me in voting for Glenn Youngkin.
I'm Glenn Youngkin, candidate for governor, and I sponsored this ad.
So there's a lot going on there, but the book that she's referring to that's so explicit, and she couldn't believe what she was reading. Pull up this Washington Post piece from the time. This is from 2013. Fairfax County parent wants Beloved banned from school system. Beloved is a book by Pulitzer Prize winning author Toni Morrison. And it is about, it's like, I read it a while ago, I think in high school too. It's a ghost story, right? And using it as an allegory to basically talk about slavery.
Which, by the way, you cannot talk about slavery without talking about rape.
Exactly.
Like transatlantic slavery particularly, I mean, absolutely part and parcel with that entire, it's like built into the price of the human beings that they were buying. Like, absolutely huge part of slavery.
Of course. And so It's told from the point of view of a mother haunted by the death of her child. I'm taking this from the Washington Post piece. A 2-year-old girl she kills to save from a life spent in bondage. And so it was a bestseller. It was published in the 80s, and it makes sense for that kind of literature to be taught in schools.
Toni Morrison, one of the great authors of the past 50 years. I mean, of all American history.
Yes. Yeah. And so the right wing, let me just jump into a brief moment of hypocrisy shaming, even though it's not effective, but I have to point out that these are the cancel culture people who want to burn books, basically.
This is, you're not listening to the parents when they say they would like to burn books.
Yeah. And they say it's about the rights of their children when really how that mother felt was, I am anxious about my own assumptions about America being challenged, and so I'm going to project that onto my kids. Now, this happened years and years ago, but it's convenient to be brought up now because all of this same stuff, cancel culture, all of the right wing being silenced, what was the previous iteration of it?
Dr. Seuss.
Dr. Seuss, but it was cancel culture, and before it was
political correctness.
Political correctness. It's all the same stuff. And so you can easily copy and paste a story from 2013 and then make it about the critical race theory mania that's happened right now. So it's quite easy for Glenn Youngkin to tap into this from a story that happened a while ago. And then additionally, it also taps into that core anxiety about rights as parents and rights as mothers, right? That the world is changing and parents don't necessarily have the same grasp over their children that they used to. Mothers are outside the home, and how scary is that? This is a point that Sam brings up regularly. And so you're able to tap into that core anxiety. This is what happens when your kids are outside the house, and society isn't the way that it was in 1965.
100 years ago, we had an entire court case called the Scopes Monkey Trial, where parents didn't want their kids taught that we evolved from alongside, like, basically apes.
Yeah.
And we come from that family of animals. And like, this is basically the same thing, just slightly updated because we want to deny our more recent history, not the evolutionary history, but the more recent history of America exploitation of labor, often among racial lines.
And also to point out that I just want to point out that Beloved was not being taught to her 8-year-old, or the high school kid. Senior in high school. Senior in high school.
Yeah, homeschool your kid.
Yeah. If you want to opt out of it, homeschool your kid. Now, I don't advocate for that because it undercuts the social or the social importance of public school, but
it's really about like wanting everyone else to be as dumb as your kid.
Yeah.
Like because you can't prepare your child to understand Toni Morrison. None of our kids can be exposed to it either.
Right. So just to point out that this is exactly what they're doing here.
Yeah, and
cancel culture, yes.
But it's a big, like, it's an authoritarian project dressed up as one for liberty of parents or whatever. But really what these people are doing is, you have to teach my unmasked, unvaccinated kid. You have to teach them only what I want you to, not what you might actually think would be right as an educator. And it has to be that America is good and George Washington can't tell a lie. And like, that's what these people want, and they're not going to stop fighting for it, and we just have to stand up to them and tell them no, just like we did with the frickin' evolution stuff.
Right. Bourbon Socialist. I'm unironically in the parents don't matter camp. Why do some parents think that they had because they had an ugly ass kid, that means they have any insight to what the whole ass school district can teach?
You have as much as any other parent.
Yeah. By the way, it's not like leftist parents would be listened to if they were saying, please teach Beloved. And they also wouldn't participate in that kind of political action because it's not honestly the motivation. Yeah. And if you have those kinds of proclivities and you're on the left or whatever, you kind of trust your kid to learn and filter that kind of information through and learn from it. I mean, I wouldn't. I learned about Atlas Shrugged and all that bullshit.
Oh, I got taught that in college, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, among much better books in a class that actually contextualized it properly, not just like, look at this person that has a good philosophy on life. Do you have the teacher's one?
The teacher's one?
Yeah, so there's this older clip from September 29th here. I believe it's CNN, is that right? Don Lemon talking, or CNN's Evan McMorris, Santoro, speaking to a mom. This is a Tennessee mom who's leading some of these sorts of anti-CRT stuff. And it's just interesting the way that, well, we can play it and then we'll react to it.
Okay.
I'm just going to play the full one. Yeah.
Just outside of Nashville, basic American history is up for.
His parents taught him about George Washington, and he identifies George Washington as a white man, and then asks if he would be killed back then because he has brown skin. I mean, he's judging George Washington not by any of what by being the founder of our country.
So when do we tell the kid that, in fact, he may have been killed back then because of the color of his skin?
Well, I'm not sure that's what you teach, that you would have been killed for the color of your skin. That's a narrative, really.
Robin Steenman is trying to change the narrative on race.
That's a narrative.
So it is a narrative, and actually, I want to see what she's saying and say, like, actually, you're right. If that's all they're teaching, that if you were a black person in colonial Virginia, you would be immediately killed, that would be the wrong lesson to teach somebody. The correct lesson is that if George Washington comes galloping up in his horse and sees a black person that he doesn't know who they belong to, he's not going to kill them on the spot. He is going to enslave them and use their labor on his plantation. And failing that, failing acceptance of that sort of slavery, then that person will be killed. So that should be that's the fuller lesson that parents' child should be taught in this instance.
Yeah, the full context of slavery is a narrative, but my commitment to an American exceptionalist white ideal, that's not a narrative. That's just a myth that I think is so dandy.
This is myth protection. This is like, we want to look at all the great things he did founding our country. Like, not let's actually historicize George Washington as somebody who always had an eye on, say, property in Ohio, and that might have sweetened the pot for him to leave office because he can start exploiting some of that sort of stuff. Like Washington, yeah, I mean, or historicize the way his dad came to the States and immediately married a widow so he could inherit the plantation that she had. Like, that sort of, is that the founding that she meant? I don't kind of think it is.
Isn't it? It is not a coincidence that there is a huge overlap between evangelical Christian ideology and this like mysticizing and the mythologizing of founding fathers and the American exceptionalist ideal. It's like religious commitment. It's so childish. You really just think that George Washington was this honest dude who he could never tell a lie, as you say, Matt, right? The cherry tree. Have you heard the myth? Thomas Jefferson, don't mention that he had slaves. He had a loving relationship with the slaves that he raped and fathered children with. I mean, like, why do we have to engage in this hagiography? It's nationalism mixed with their commitment to religiosity and like my emotions and my belief in the ideal. That's what needs to be protected over everything else. And it's just like a child not getting candy the way at the moment that they want it. Deal with the circumstances in front of you. Grow up. Like, are we dealing with Santa Claus here? It's just ridiculous.
It is what we're dealing with.
I mean, her, like, the way that her brain breaks when that simple question is asked. Never had to engage with a conversation topic that made her uncomfortable in any real way. I'm glad we played that.
You see why that's valuable, like, for instance, in just mass voting patterns, right? And also valuable in terms of you never really, it is a problem, like, right? Like that, I do think there's a way this stuff does get too collapsed, and slavery didn't just happen because those colonial those plantation owners hated hated Africans. It's because they were the earliest form of capitalists exploiting people on a mass level. That's why they brought them here. And I do think like
slavery was intrinsic to capitalism.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no capitalism without slavery.
Yeah, and right, and it's particularly not in sort of Anglo capitalism that could conquer the rest of the world.
Yeah, particularly as it came to like I don't know the cotton trade. That was the foundational element. That was the way that you could take it internationally. And that's what elevated capitalism beyond the initial usage of cotton coming out of India and Asia.
You look at like even me looking at my history as a North Dakotan, the North Dakota heritage, right? We have Lewis and Clark, who was also on that expedition. York the slave, who was given special dispensation by Thomas Jefferson to go into those territories, even though slavery was supposed to be banned there. But we could not get explorers through a territory unless you had slaves there to do the hard work, and also maybe even partially sort of indentured or slightly coerced translators of mixed Indian heritage. So like, yeah, I mean, it's the amount that is missed by American history and the way it's taught, particularly these sort of anti-CRT people and what they're trying to sort of cement or maintain. I don't think they're going to be able to be successful because I think fundamentally like information technology is just too advanced to like be able to deny. Like this is why the Jefferson descendants, the white Jefferson descendants, had to acknowledge that the Hemingses were also descendants of Jefferson, even though they were black, and that it proved that the rape of a slave happened is because of DNA testing. And you know, they're going to attempt to hide all this stuff from their kids, but they're not going to be able to be successful ultimately.
Bradley is daddy writes in, I'm 100% straight, but would let John Brown and General Sherman never mind. All right. Thirsting for John Brown. Bradley's daddy also says John Brown didn't go far enough. Majority Report wardrobe coordinator. A lot of these parents are just afraid of their kids asking questions like, hey, what were grandma and grandpa doing during the civil rights movement? And why did they have so many white sheets in their house? Yeah. That's like, I don't know.
Well, I mean,
I had a socialist grandpa, which like rocks, but
that is lucky.
Yeah.
I mean, that I never had like a genuine like ideological racists in my family that like, at least unless they've hidden it extremely well. But like I want like what happens to that sentiment that is extremely real and submerged. It gets manifest in this sort of cancel culture and PC culture stuff, right? Like that's just the way that they can safely elaborate how they feel censored.
Yeah. Other grandpa, maybe. DJ from Syracuse. My parents understood that they didn't understand half of what I thought, and I'm thankful they let the school decide. Yeah, I mean, anyway.
I had parents like that too. Yeah, like I went to church every week growing up, but also my parents knew like not to try to, I guess, pervert my education through their sort of spiritual beliefs, which is what's going on.
There was a lot of like, I did have to break away from that, you know, religious kind of worship of founding fathers in my family though, which is maybe why I have such resentment towards it, because it's so fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, none of that in my family.
And it still persists, so.
My
give me 2 glasses of wine at Thanksgiving and I go off on that.
The founding fathers in my household were Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett.
It's like very North Dakota as opposed to my like, you know, Northeast centric family. I just like we did so many tours. Sorry, not to. I remember going to Jefferson's house. What's it called? Monticello. And they get like, should I be into this? Like, it seems Seems like there were a lot of slaves
Put
here.
yourself in the mind of a slave owner, and wouldn't it be nice to have them all working hard and you like sitting in here reading a book and go out and ride a horse across the plantation? Wouldn't that life be great?
I'm like, even like, like at like 12 or 10, I'm like, I don't know. Bradley is daddy, who's writing in a lot and makes me want to, like, now I have to say Bradley is daddy every time. Bradley, just, yeah, take that for what you will. You're missing the point, guys. George Washington actually hated slavery, even though he didn't free them, even on his deathbed.
Yeah, that's the thing is, like, but they hate, like, when they complain about slavery as being, like, such a bad thing, it's like they hate how much work they have to do in terms of, like, whipping people and buying slaves and stuff like that. Like, they're not doing, like, I don't really buy the sincerity that, like, Jefferson would have done something if it wouldn't have meant, like, wiping himself and future generations out for
yeah. White communists. It's not hypocrisy shaming to point out a political opponent's contradiction of what they previously claimed to hold as a cherished principle. Pointing out such contradictions exposes incoherence and insincerity in political projects. I agree. It's just sometimes it's easy to fall into that being the core of the critique, and it's not as productive as other modes of critique.
There's a huge limit to hypocrisy discourse. You could demonstrate it by looking at, say, Title 42 and the border. There's a lot of people that say, look at Joe Biden said he would be different than Trump. I'm thinking of contrarian types. He said he'd be different than Trump, but now he's doing the exact same thing. And if you leave it there at the hypocrisy thing, you might as well just be naturalizing Trump's behavior and saying, well, Trump actually did the right thing because Joe Biden's not doing anything different. This is what actually, I guess, what needs to be done. When really you need to take it beyond the hypocrisy point and say Biden needs to get rid of Title 42 and start processing refugees.
Most importantly, it exposes the opponents hiding a deeper project. The Fugitive Slave Act shows that states' rights was a flimsy cover for their true project, racial subjugation. Critical race theory attacks show that free speech and cancel culture are a flimsy cover for their true project, racial subjugation. Exposing contradictions isn't shaming, which trivializes it. It is the dismantling of lies. I agree. I think we laid it out. It's an important element, but it can't be the core. But I mean, even in your defense of it, you are already engaging in more substantive critique than just the hypocrisy shaming element of it,
It's hypocrisy towards what? Like the same thing, like say we sort of de-emphasize the Kyrie Irving stuff, even though we think he's wrong. It might be, some people might say it's hypocritical. If that was Steven Crowder, you'd be all over him. It's like, yes, that's actually true.
Yep.
And I don't care about consistency towards those things.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Kyrie Irving situation, but again, not emphasizing Kyrie in and of himself, because he's just one person, and we're focused on institutions here. But, professional sports are a part of our institutions.
Also, there's a bit of a movement. I mean, I don't think it's that a real one here, but we can talk about this.
Yeah. Over the weekend, there was an incident at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. Pro-vaccine, or anti-vax protesters went outside the Barclays Center in support of Brooklyn Nets point guard Kyrie Irving, who has, as of this point, decided to sit out the season because he's unvaccinated. And in New York, they're requiring all players, anybody going into one of these arenas, whether it be MSG or Barclays Center, I believe that's the rule, to be fully vaccinated. Kyrie Irving has taken a stand against it. I don't agree with that stand, but what I think is instructive about this footage is that, one, these same people were probably vehemently against Kyrie when he was speaking out about Black Lives Matter, for example, and two, one, you can see how these protesters, it's not fully a right-wing protest, but the tactics that they use here, it didn't end up being as devastating as, say, January 6th, but like, there are lessons learned for some of these right-wingers from what we saw on January 6th. And much like what we're seeing internationally in Brazil, for example, we're seeing the questioning of the validity of voting and voting machines, Project Veritas t-shirts being worn by Bolsonaro's kids. You have Vladimir Putin talking about cancel culture. There are lessons being gleaned from what the MAGA movement engaged in. and some of the successes there. And the right wing as a whole, even though they are by numbers a bit marginalized, the fact that they the fact that they are willing to go in and engage in these tactics, I think should scare everybody, and you'll see what I'm referring to outside the Barclays Center over the weekend. All right. Well, again, not a serious situation. I think it was played up a little on social media, but
I walked around Barclays Center about a half hour after this, and yeah, it was all cleared out, and there's like free Kyrie stuff stick to the Barclays Center, but I will say the COVID-19 testing booth was up and running perfectly fine. So thankfully, because I have walked past Barclays Center a couple of times and seen people like that getting harassed by these freaks.
Well, I mean, we saw it in Union Square. We covered it on the show. They turned over that COVID-19 testing booth, those anti-vax protesters. And I mean, the thing that evoked the January 6th stuff was just like the pushing of the barricades to go towards Barclays.
I'm not always against pushing of barricades. I think if you push barricades for something righteous, it's good. Those people weren't pushing it for a Medicare for all. They were pushing it so a single NBA player could get special treatment for a citywide
I'm not trying to divorce the content from it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the idea that, like, let Kyrie play. If those people got what they want to any degree more, then we might not have a basketball season. And it's very important.
Kyrie's getting paid $17 million and he's not playing.
Exactly. And he's also not helping his team and probably going to kill their chances for a national championship this year because he doesn't want to get the vaccine and because he wants to sort of, I guess, speak for those people. And I mean, look, I don't know. I support the mandate. Like, I think people should get the vaccine. You can't put people in danger. Like, we already know that even people who have got COVID before can get COVID again. So you're leaving immunity on the table, and you just decide that we can't just decide we're going to allow this basketball player to do it. Because fundamentally what these people are about they're against the mandate entirely. Yeah. They're not just against it for Kyrie. They wouldn't, like that might let some of the arrow the tires if Kyrie was allowed to play and they weren't, but that's not a society that we should be wanting to live in either, because someone's so important that they can opt out of public health.
Yeah, none of those people knew who Kyrie was before this, or not none of them, but a lot of them were not engaged in any real meaningful way. Talking about the sports team?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's not a purely MAGA crowd. There are like plenty of non-MAGA people there. There's some people with BLM stuff there, which I think is a bit silly. Just me personally, one of the people who is organizing is supposedly a TA from the Bronx that I mean, people can threaten online. We don't need to go into it deeper, but like, I don't know really what more there is to say about this other than, like, Kyrie should get the shot and help his team win basketball games. I'll
say this, right? So I'm not referring to just the simple, like, maybe conspiracy element in there. It's the more right-wing conspiracy element of that anti-vax crowd. Like, these same people were the people who were saying that Kaepernick needs to shut up and stop kneeling, and he needs to participate and help his team, and it all has to be about the team. And they're also the same people that if a football player has a concussion or a basketball player is unable to play, maybe resting, get out there, rub some dirt in it, contribute to your team. And winning is supposed to be the number one way to judge an athlete, and Kyrie is choosing not to win.
Well, there's some sort of controversy now because Kyrie was supposedly named to the NBA 75 team, and then apparently, like, this sort of might have knocked him off, which my understanding is the NBA top 75 was chosen by journalists, so I would think that journalists could respond to things that are happening currently, such as a player deciding to not play an entire season because they want to make a dumb point about public health, one they don't frankly understand fully themselves. And like the Jonathan Isaac thing isn't even that much better. Everybody falling over themselves to talk about how eloquent Jonathan Isaac is. The fact of the matter is like, if we had a health system that could do tests for everybody, not just talking about basketball players in the NBA, I'm talking about workers in general, that could test their antibodies, then maybe we could have this thing where you could opt out of vaccine requirements because we could tell you have the antibodies, right? We don't have a system like that. And we can't start it with Jonathan Isaac, because where does it stop, right? Because fundamentally, again, why everyone's acting, and particularly the right wingers are acting like they have a champion in Kyrie and Jonathan Isaac, is not because they want them to play basketball. It's because they don't want any kind of vaccine or public health mandate or even strong suggestions at all.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a few more calls. Calling from a 580 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 580?
Hey, this is Little Mack. How you doing?
Little Mack, where are you from?
From Virginia right now. Army brat. Was in the Army, but I'm retired.
Okay, gotcha. What's on your mind?
Well, I was going to call in defense of libertarianism with Sam, and I forgot he wasn't on today, so I don't know if you're up for it. I was looking at the Grafton situation with the Bears, and I realized, that libertarianism can't go all the way. But then I looked at the voter restriction laws, and I started thinking, you can't let people who are going to vote for Bears to show up and run us out of town. So you kind of need some laws. So I was really hoping to get some advice on where that limit is of libertarianism, because, you got to have some government, right? So what is the minimum government? I was wondering if you could help me. Help you with the minimum government? Well, as a libertarian, I believe that, the government should only get involved as much as necessary. And we lived our dream up in Grafton a little while ago, and then all of a sudden I got overrun with bears because people kept throwing their garbage everywhere. And I realized as a libertarian that's just not a great idea. And so I started thinking, well, we have to have some form of minimum government. And I started getting into it, and I was thinking, well, as soon as I start adding it up, at some point it stops becoming libertarianism. Well, I was going to call and see. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, it's because libertarianism is stupid.
Right. I don't know. I don't know why I'm the one providing you with the minimum amount of government. I mean, I don't know how you measure that in metric tons or in liters.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. So, I used to think libertarianism was this great philosophy. I've been watching Ben Shapiro for a couple of years, and he seemed like such a genius, all sorts of high-end ideas. And
you're not a real libertarian.
No, I am. I've become disillusioned.
Oh, yeah.
Well, so, okay, how about
Happy Halloween, fake libertarian.
Yeah, how about instead of asking us...
No, I was going to call in, I forgot saying what, no, but yeah, no, that's what mostly I wanted to just talk about this what's going on with the infrastructure bill, and okay. I really want, and hey, I get that something is better than nothing, I do agree with that, and so at some point we're going to have to take it because we're going to have to take it. But what I really hope is that progressives don't walk away or let the establishment walk away thinking that they've had a victory and that they're going to be able to sell this thing. I think that after it's done, we need to take what we can get, but then we need to punish the establishment as much as possible and let them know that, no, this was not acceptable, and you're not going to be able to campaign on this. Because you don't negotiate with corruption is my thought, and I was kind of wondering what your thoughts were on it.
Well, I don't know how you punish it. I mean, honestly, to me, if they're, I mean, Bernie's already kind of planting his flag at this moment about the Medicare expansion. He's essentially saying it's not coming out. If Manchin really thinks he's gonna like try to big ball it, for lack of a better word, and really not allow for the expansion of Medicare benefits for dental, vision, and hearing, then I think progressives sink the bill. I think you sink the bill.
Yeah, well, that's what I hope so. That's what I was wondering what your line was. I personally think we should sink it now, but I know that maybe I'm being a little bit too hardcore about it. But then the answer is then if we don't sink it now, even if we get these minimal, Medicare stuff, which is, it's not nothing, but when they're negotiating from a place of dishonesty, at what point does it go from being about the bill to about the American values and how we're going to make bills? And at what point do we accept a defeat here for future victories?
Well, I mean, I think it's difficult because we're acting as if sort of voters and sort of pundits are the same as electoral people or elected officials, which I mean, like, I don't think, I think you're right that whatever happens, it's not adequate, and I think that's the message of the left. And I think anybody on sort of left media should not do sort of get out the vote by trying to like put lipstick on this pig, and it needs to be framed as a betrayal in media. How like the squad does it, I would hope that it's along those lines. And otherwise, I think that would be a sign of intense weakness. And I would expect the rest of the Democrats to run on it as if it's the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to make sure I'm understanding kind of what you're saying. So yes, we do see it as a betrayal that it is. I mean, are we going to let Manchin get away with this? Is that the answer?
Well, who's we? Like, I think
progressives, America. Like, when is he going to stop? And sorry, go ahead.
But like the thing is, like, we don't have anything that I can talk about Manchin's daughter being corrupt and talk about all this stuff, but all I can do is talk.
Let me rephrase. When I say we, I actually mean Biden. And letting Biden get away with it.
Biden's 100% going to let him get away with this.
And how do we let Biden get away? Do we let Biden get away with it?
So how do we punish Biden? I guess that's what I'm getting. So how do we punish Biden for letting him get away? Because if it were me, I would have taken Manchin into a back room and told him he's going to toe the line, or we are going to investigate every single dollar you've ever made in government until we find something and throw your ass in jail, or you're going to get on board.
Yeah.
At this point,
well, that would have been
that's
good.
What I would do.
It's that this is Biden who's like closer to the Manchin ideology than he is to Bernie's ideology, and so you have to just remember that.
But that has to be the message. Your message is the right one, and whether it can carry the day, like, I'm not so sure.
Right. And so then, the point is that Matt made the right point here. I mean, we're just analysts here, but from a progressive like squad perspective, yes, that is, I think your message has to rule the day. Biden's not going to engage in this, so I think the primary for the 2022 midterms with some of these progressive candidates, I mean, like, Henry Cuellar is one of the few conservative Democrats who are trying to hold up this bill in the House. And Jessica Cisneros, who I want to have on the show at some point, is running against him. So, like, a lot of that fight will probably have to happen in these contested primaries with true progressives going up against some of these conservative Democrats. Biden's, like, barely visible for the media, who's not going to ask these questions. So, I am not sure how to hold him accountable, but you can hold him accountable by proxy with some of these conservative Democrats in primary races.
Do you support, like, I support the idea of primarying him, even if he runs again?
Oh, yeah.
Is that something you guys think?
Oh, yes.
You're down with that?
100%.
Okay, good.
100%.
All right.
Appreciate the call, little Mac.
Yeah, I won't monopolize the phone time. Yeah, I appreciate it, but thanks. That was the question I wanted to get at.
Yeah, I appreciate you. You almost had us fooled at the beginning.
I'd love somebody to primary Biden right now.
Yeah, have a good one, man.
You too.
Bye. Oh, all right. Should we do Charlie Kirk or no? I want to do this thing.
Can we do this?
Dana Perino.
Oh right, yeah.
Do you want to do C-SPAN?
I want to do my C-SPAN guy. But
Okay.
All right. Whichever one you want to start with.
Let's start with Dana Perino, and then we'll do that thing. Dana Perino, she on Fox News interviewed this Marine veteran, James Kilser. He was able to successfully disarm a robber at a convenience store in Arizona. So national news. And he made a statement before the segment ended, and Dana Perino and seemingly her entire production team had no idea how to respond.
We're great to meet you, and if anybody sees James out there, buy him either an energy drink, I think it was Monster was your preferred, or a beer if you want one. Thanks so much,
I'll
James.
take a beer, please.
Beer? Get him a beer, everybody, and I'd love to buy you one as well on me in Yuma, Arizona. Thank you so much, James.
Yeah. And remember, Epstein didn't kill himself.
Okay, got it. Very clever. Well, Trace, I mean, he is amazing. Imagine if he...
And remember, oh man, it's just like watching Dana Perino try to relate to him too. Monster Energy, that's what you said, right? Or a beer, you say. A beer, huh? Oh, I would love to buy you a beer, huh?
Yeah.
So relatable, so American.
Well, they have
American hero.
Like the Epstein stuff is very interesting because they, like anything, they can't say no to any sort of populist sort of energy and
monster energy.
And then they sort of convince themselves that Epstein only sort of is bad for the Clintons and not like just capitalism and American intelligence. And
so they have to entertain that.
They have to entertain it, but like
but her class of person does not want to entertain an Epstein a conversation about Epstein maybe being murdered.
The that class of people, like Washington Post had an article like recently saying I can't find it because the person deleted the tweet, but I quote tweeted saying this is genuinely abominable, and it was basically saying like as a multiple choice, like which one of these wasn't a conspiracy, and it had like JFK and Epstein and all this stuff on, and MLK maybe, and it's like, even if you, first of all, just to say about Epstein, definitely like killed himself or not, like allowed to kill himself. The guards absolutely, I think, are under investigation. Maybe have gotten some sort of deal. I'm not sure what's the most current thing there, but like that guy was not under entire supervision to even like, let's say he wasn't murdered, but like allowed to kill himself. That is still absolute like mistrial of justice, a miscarriage of justice.
Yes.
But like there's this, and I do think like there, like about that class of people, there's this way that like any sort of investigation into the JFK assassination or MLK, that these are dangerous.
Oh well, they are not the kinds of questions that polite society like Dana Perino would engage in.
And I'm sorry, like we should, the polite society has got us up Schitt's Creek without a paddle.
Yeah.
And I frankly think that even if you come down on the opposite side of, say, myself on the JFK assassination and think that there was no funny business regarding sort of organized crime and intelligence services, and that's everything's above board, it's still a worthwhile exercise in civics where you learn all sorts of things about like the U-2 spy plane, for instance, or like Cuban politics. Like the amount that you actually learn from that, like I don't think
is worth the question.
It's not like these sort of Illuminati conspiracy theories where you're sort of you're collapsing and sort of lowering the resolution of what power looks like, where it's just like some omnipresent thing. The JFK assassination,
which is also what I feel like UFOs also distract from that, because then we're not necessarily having a conversation about maybe there are covert military and intelligence practices and experiments that could be identified as UFOs.
Right. I mean, Epstein himself was apparently Acosta, former attorney general, right? Said that he was told not to touch Epstein because he was intelligence.
Yes.
And like, so the idea that though the CIA should be called the conspiracy agency, like that's what that is. The idea that conspiracy theories like the conspiracies exist. There are conspiracies in the world.
The conspiracy intersectional agency.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Conspiratorial intersecting agency.
That's for you, Tucker.
But like there are different kinds of conspiracy theories, and this sort of like circling the wagons by the elite sort of liberal press is, and I'm using that term very broadly to include Dana Perino, which I understand.
Okay, fine. Elite, like ruling class.
Exactly,
press.
ruling class press. Like it is. It's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, again, to return to your original point about how they want to dance around Vince Foster and they want to dance around Epstein because they are useful narratives for the base and to go after the Clintons. But they don't actually want to answer any of these questions more broadly in a way that goes after institutions or talk about how, yes, Bill Clinton intimately involved with Jeffrey Epstein. You know, Donald Trump had a bit of a relationship with him as well. Yeah. So that's
a fun video of that.
Yeah. Look up the quotes that Donald Trump has about Jeffrey Epstein, and look up the rest of Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book, which, let's be real, does not just include Democrats, but it's the way for the Fox News audience, and Dana Perino is a part of the more daytime news, less or more respectable relative to the opinion hosts like Hannity, Ingram, and Carlson. So she is even more reticent to engage in those kinds of conversations. But but like sometimes you're confronted with it because this is the audience that you're cultivating, and then you've got to scurry away and have some nervous laughter.
Well, you also have to, as a cable anchor, you have to treat your audience like historically illiterate babies. And that's basically everyone who dismisses the idea that the head of state of America could be killed is also, I guess, apparently isn't aware that that's what the CIA was doing to other countries. We have assassinated heads of state with conspiracies, and so like the idea that those sorts of rogue actors who control intelligence, which is basically like old aristocrats from the 20th century, 19th century, like anti-democratic people, like that have always, I don't know, I'm a bit rambling, but like
no, you make sense.
Exist.
Yeah, but there's never like, and now I'm going to sound like a Russiagator, but the MSNBC flip side of that is like there's never a historicizing of our election interference when it comes to Russian interference.
Exactly.
And so like both of these are two sides of Russiagate. There was evidence about Russian interference. I'm not saying that there wasn't, but the extent to which it was
surfed by the worst kind of actors.
Was a conspiracy theory in a variety of ways, and it obscures our own election interference in countless countries for 100 years, basically, plus, but much more ramped up with the CIA.
Also, just one final note, and one thing that I disagree with Chomsky about, who is sort of anti the JFK conspiracy theorists, but JFK conspiracy theorists have done massive gains for America's understanding of government bureaucracy through demands for transparency, through freedom of information, stuff like that. Like, regardless of where you come down on conclusions of something that happened, 60 years ago, that is valuable.
Boom. All right, let's take another call. Calling from an 847 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Emma.
Yes.
Emma. It's Josh here.
Hi, Josh. Josh from Chicago. I'm sorry about this weekend.
There's some good news, Emma.
Okay.
Matt, do you have the Bush thing we got him? That sound button?
I don't got it now.
Sorry.
Oh.
But I can do it.
Well,
ladies and gentlemen, we've got him.
Okay. Matt Nagy has COVID.
I know. But he's vaccinated, right?
I believe so, yeah.
This is the head coach of the Chicago Bears. Do you think he's going to get another year with Justin Fields? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. There are people who still think he's a good coach. He's one of the worst head coaches in the league.
You're right, Emma.
I've been right for years.
I should not doubt you. You were right.
Thank you.
He is awful. That was unwatchable yesterday.
You guys can't let him do to Fields what he did to Trubisky.
We need to switch to the Vikings or maybe change topics because this is a bit slow.
Okay, yeah, I actually did have something to talk about the vaccines, though. I didn't want to talk about the vaccines.
Okay, go ahead.
So I just actually got my third dose, my booster, I guess.
Nice.
Last week. I have a lot of new superpowers. But I think especially with the Kyrie Irving thing, and I sort of like walked by some of that stuff as well, or I didn't see it up close and personal. I walked by it as well, but like I think the thing that's really upsetting, especially with the anti-vax stuff, is like if you're an athlete, shouldn't you want to like put your body at the most, like have as every competitive advantage you'd want to have? And I think it's like the people sort of defending him as this being, especially seeing like Black Lives Matter protesters there, like this isn't like, I know like, this country has a history of experimenting on people of color, black people with vaccines. I get that.
Yeah.
Kyrie Irving's stance on this has nothing to do with that history and everything to do with the fact that this is some misguided freedom of choice thing. And I think it's bullshit that people would come out to defend him like this.
You're right.
Like,
You're right. And I think, whatever connection it does have to those ideas of racial justice is like based on YouTube conspiracy wormholes that I think like are something that, as a white person I haven't encountered, but there's like a separate kind of thing he's engaging in with, I don't know. I've just heard, heard of these videos that I don't have familiarity with.
Like, I mean, most NBA players did get vaxxed.
Yeah.
Like they are looking for that competitive advantage, and like it's ironic that he's a flat earther because like to me it's not that much more interesting than flat Earth. Like you're gonna get a few people at the margins who just aren't gonna be they're gonna have been misled. They're gonna have something going on where they're not gonna be able to get on board, and that's just tough. And then you move on without them because frankly that's what happens in a pandemic when you have a vaccine available.
Yeah.
And like they can join if they just get vaccinated. That's all it takes.
I appreciate the call, Josh.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
You too.
Sorry about the bears. A sigh, and then I hung up on him.
But I mean, it's very silly for BLM posters to be all over there because well, we know who's being affected most by COVID, and like I'm sure that maybe the NBA players would be fine if they got COVID, although there's that hockey player that went out, Marco Rossi, he's a 19-year-old. But what about all the people at the concessions that are in close contract with all these fans and stuff? You're just going to go against mandates and kill some of them.
Yeah. Penzatucky Mike, the Trillbillies did a great breakdown of that WAPO article on conspiracies in a recent episode. We recommend, if you guys haven't seen this, it was a Washington Post tool where you answer quiz questions and they say it's like identify which one of these is a conspiracy and like was only
which one of these is an acceptable conspiracy to
yes
believe?
One of them was the JFK assassination, the other one was about Epstein getting murdered, and maybe, and then the other one was about COVID-19, right?
I can't remember. They deleted it.
Yeah, well, because I don't know. I hope to God that was an intern who came up with that, but that's, I think, hope against hope.
Somebody with a resume.
Yeah, that's a pretty stark example of manufacturing consent. Thanks for 2069. While it may be true that pointing out Democratic hypocrisy and leaving it at that is a limiting strategy, but a lot of that depends on the audience. I feel like the Republicans are terrible is a given in most leftist conversations I hear or participate in. Harping on don't forget the Republicans are worst fears into thought-terminating cliche area. I don't
Can you read that again?
While it may be true that pointing out Democratic hypocrisy and leaving it at that is a limiting strategy, but a lot of that depends on the audience. I feel like the Republicans are terrible is a
Stop there. I never said just do Republicans are terrible. I said elaborate something beyond the hypocrisy, which is Title 42 is basically like thinly veiled white supremacist border closure policy, and you should get rid of it. Like, that's not just Republicans are bad.
No, it's just about having an underlying political, overarching philosophy.
And
with principles that isn't just about look at this, like, and here isn't this such an inconsistency.
And guess what? Like, why I'm rubbed the wrong way is because I often find a lot of these people who are so focused on Dem hypocrisy are the people who are also so over what the Republicans are doing. But also often, like, particularly these media people, I'll just name Dorr, like to throw Noam Chomsky or Glenn Greenwald, like to throw Noam Chomsky's name around in defending their sort of like sort of theoretical background or what for the theory behind their practice. And I know what Noam Chomsky says about the GOP, and I'm basically in agreement with it. Yeah, but I didn't realize that that's what you were talking about. I thought it was like in terms of just commenting on Republican politics. I mean, I think hypocrisy, I'm just talking in this specific case, this is why hypocrisy is boring. It's in other examples, I think it's limited in other ways, I guess. Yeah. All right, let's do that C-SPAN clip that you were referring to. So, HuffPost labor reporter Dave Jamieson was on C-SPAN to talk about Striketober, and a caller called in and had some, I mean, like, where would you find these critiques of labor unions? This must be an incredibly right-wing caller, I'd imagine, right, Matt? Is this a right-wing caller? This is some old retired asshole. Okay.
He's on the independent line, the independent call line.
He's an independent. You have to identify yourself on C-SPAN of like what side you think you're on. So I was just curious. Yeah, this is the independent former boss line. Okay, let's take a listen.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, excuse me, but I told you're going to cut me off. I don't want to speak. You let a lot of people go on and on. You going to let me speak?
Steve, ask your question. You're on now.
Okay, fine. All right, I want to mention three things about labor unions, okay? First of all, I'm a white-collar person. I'm as white-collar as they get. I double majored as an undergrad in physics and math and got a master's degree in materials science. Mm-hmm. I moved out to California in 1988, and I had to manage blue-collar people for a year, and that's what unions represent, blue-collar folks, all right? That was the longest year of my life, okay? They didn't care about learning. They didn't care about improving their skills and things like that. They could have cared less about that. They were just there to collect the paycheck. Of course, the bigger the paycheck, the better. That's obvious. That's basically managing the trailer park trash. That's who joins unions.
Stephen, what's your question?
Okay, that's the first. It's not a question. These are comments, like you let other people give comments about their histories. Second of all, inflation. Concerning, that's what unions generate. They generate inflation. I live here at a condo in a high rise. I couldn't believe the things I was hearing about what I was not allowed to do in my high rise. I can understand not being able to do structural work, like pulling down concrete walls and things like that because of weakening the structure, and I should know what that is, being given my educational background. But about the only thing I'm allowed to do now is paint. Why is this? Simple, because the unions have bribed the town council and the building inspectors to make sure that, like,
all right, well, I mean,
we can maybe try to pick it up.
Let's pick it up in a sec, but there's a lot there. One, David Feldman really committing to his lefty from way back bit there.
I mean, yeah, this is it's not even a worker from way back. He's just like always a white collar guy.
Oh, he emphasized he's white collar. He has all of these degrees and he lives in a high rise.
I mean, that's the. Well, I wonder what he wants to do with his luxury high rise. Like, I don't think.
Oh, luxury high rise. I'm so sorry.
Well, I don't think he said that, but I assume that's what he's talking about here. I mean, this is a wealthy guy. We can tell.
He made that clear.
The comment about like didn't care about learning skills, and it's like if your wage is if you're not getting enough in wages, why you're not going to be motivated to learn more workplace skills, like actually ownership over an enterprise. As somebody who now owns alongside David Grissom a business, I mean, I think that's just fatuous bullshit about people not wanting skills. But do we play a little more, Bradley?
Yeah, I mean, and just like the rage in which the rage that he has for the people that worked under him or worked with him, like it sounds really personal, dude, and sounds like you are projecting your own like insecurity and need to be a superior in all the ways that you so conveniently list for C-SPAN. And that means that you're probably just a little bit afraid of not having legitimacy, and so you need to put up all of these artificial barriers between you and other non-very white-collar people below you.
I want to make a sitcom of him having to go to California and manage blue-collar folks, because it sounds hilarious.
Yes, it's a real fish out of water situation, or maybe just a reverse undercover boss. Or no, undercover boss, but except forced in a prison camp. All right, continue.
Can't even lay down laminate flooring in my condo. Third thing, we hear all the time, and this man over here from the HuffPost should know this, and I don't think he does. We hear this now for going back, 15 years, how the workers are not getting the benefits of their productivity, and that this started in the 70s. But has anybody ever asked whether those workers were overpaid before their real wages started leveling out?
All right, we'll put that to Dave Jameson.
Yeah, not sure where to start there. Thanks for the call. You know, as for like blaming unions for inflation, you know, we have very high inflation right now. Maybe it's temporary, maybe it's not. I think you'd be hard pressed to find many economists out there who would lay the blame for the inflation we're seeing.
Yeah. So, man, that's the Feldman joke though. So everyone's been saying that productivity of workers has been decoupled from their wages for 30 years now. Does anybody think that maybe this? First of all, like, there's a reason that it was aligned with productivity in the first place. Like that, there was some sort of correlation there that meant workers were sharing in it. Like the idea that they need to stop sharing in it because they were sharing in it. It's a great. I think like the thing that's great about this is I think a lot of wealthy, powerful people literally think this. Mm-hmm. And they know that they can't elaborate it publicly because it'd be a PR nightmare. Because saying like, yeah, you're fucking done with raises, and it's a good thing you've been done with raises for 50 years or 40 years now, because that's all you deserve. I mean, I think the Republicans should just run on that in 2024.
How about the skills thing? It's like it's the less genteel version of the we need to just train workers to use computers. Who said that in the primary? Was it about like workers who used to work at Macy's or whatever? They need to learn how to do it. Was it Bloomberg? Probably. But that, I mean, that's just the more bold-faced version of that. And like a lot of this resentment too, I guess he called in on the independent line, but the reason I asked about his political identification, because you pointed this out about the January 6ers, Matt. Like a lot of these guys are the business owning class, and they have resentment that they have to share the profits that they make with their workers. And oftentimes for a lot of these, especially racist MAGA folks, they are exploiting undocumented workers. They are trying to cut corners on wages, on benefits, whatever the case may be. And that's where a lot of this comes from. Just think Marjorie Taylor Greene, who owns her own business, or did. It's the same kind of people.
I hope he gets into a luxury place that he can put down laminate flooring down. So
right.
I truly feel like, I mean, that's talk about like knowing what the working class goes through. You're unable to put down laminate flooring in your high-rise apartment.
So he's in Miami, right?
Yes, exactly.
Let's guess. Like, oh, you want to put you sound tacky as hell.
I want to know everything about this guy.
Yeah.
I want to know where every dollar came in, where every dollar went out. Like, I think it'd be fascinating to know.
All right, let's read some more IMs. Pajama Boy, hey, I'm pretty sure you mentioned you watched Succession. Yes, I did. Do you think so far the season has been kind of tired? The conversation the Roys have are just the same retreading. It's kind of getting old. I will love whatever I just love dialogue that is well written, and it doesn't get better written than what they're doing in Succession, honestly. But I am noticing that this season they filmed in COVID. Just, you can tell. Even though they're really big budget, like a lot of these conversations are in closed rooms with a few people. So I think that might be some of the stuff that you're noticing, and like it's like natural. It's gonna show. But I have faith in that. Fuck. I just accidentally refreshed and I can't see the IMs anymore. Dang, I'm really sorry, guys. I just lost a bunch of IMs. So write in if you haven't yet. I can tell I'm feeling much better about Mac Jones than Josh is feeling about Justin Fields, though I guess a lot of the difference here is coaching, says Fierce Deity. All right, let's take another call. This will be the final call of the day. Calling from a 203 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, it's Matt from Connecticut.
Matt from Connecticut. How are you?
I'm doing great. I thought I had to call back in, make sure I updated y'all on the Brazilian situation we've got going on here.
Yes, well, thank you very much. We were quite concerned after Lindsey Graham repeated the same story, very obsessed with Brazilians.
They've moved to phase 2. We're all going through our mandatory vax and wax, and they've moved us on to Bossa Nova. So it's all we're allowed to listen to.
Vax and wax.
Which actually isn't that bad. I'm pretty okay with that.
Oh, it's pretty hilarious, yeah.
But I actually was calling because you had mentioned CRT, backlash earlier.
Yeah.
And being from the Northeast, I think we kind of, people will poo-poo the whole thing as if it's not really happening here.
Yes.
I encourage everyone to look into what their local school board is talking about and who is running right now. Because the town I grew up in, Shoreline Town in Connecticut, was recently, I don't know if it made national news, but some local news did a great story on it, where the person running the Republican school board campaign, their manager, had a little leaked text saying that helping kids of color to feel they belong has a negative effect on white Christian or conservative kids.
Wow.
And that kind of got pushed around, sort of a little unmasking right there. But that's basically what the Republican school board members are running on in that town right now, which I wouldn't have known about if people I went to school with weren't sharing that on social media, on Facebook. So make sure you look into who's running. If you're in Connecticut, local elections are on November 2nd. I'm not sure if it's different in other states, but look into it because you never know who's living amongst you.
I really appreciate it. That is great advice because Republicans are trying to make this local fight, which is astroturfed, a project of political engagement. And without some sort of counterbalance to it, it's going to be difficult. So
it's a midterm strategy.
Yeah. Appreciate the call, Matt. Thanks.
And appreciate the advice even more. And folks,
Yes.
if you do keep an eye on your school boards, call in like Matt and let us know what's going on.
Yes, absolutely. That reminded me a little bit of something. I'm actually going to send this to you, Bradley. Sorry to do this last minute, but I'm going to just pull this up if you could, because this happened over the weekend. So talking about, talking about the concept of fighting back against Republicans in a way that they've been fighting us for quite a while with. That was a little convoluted. I'm trying to pull up this article. So Illinois Democrats are gerrymandering very aggressively. So here's Dave Wasserman pointing out breaking, as predicted, this happened on Saturday. Illinois Democrats have revised their proposal to a safer, more aggressive 14 Democrat, 3 Republican gerrymander. It's still about as ugly as before, though. And just scroll down a little bit here, Bradley. So, as I hinted last Sunday, Wasserman says this version creates a new, much-anticipated Latino seat on the north side of Chicago, but it would do so by merging the homes of Representatives Marie Newman and Sean Casten in a reconfigured Illinois 06. And then here's what he anticipates it's going to be down here. New districts, 14 Democrat, 3 Republicans. So, basically, long story short, Illinois is doing what Republicans on the state level have been doing for quite a while, Illinois Democrats, and they're trying to consolidate Democratic power. And this has been a long time coming because Republicans have been doing this for decades at this point, years at this point.
Also, like, draw one of the dissimilarities, which is that when the Democrats do this, it brings it more in line with overall popular vote, and when the Republicans do it, it's because they want to secure power for a minority
yes,
party.
Exactly. So there was, I think, a hesitancy to engage in this because gerrymandering is insane. It should be done along popular vote lines, but the reason it isn't done in that way, as Matt mentioned, is because doing so would benefit Democrats and not Republicans. So as long as Republicans are engaging in this practice, and as long as this partisan gerrymandering is legal in this country, every state level Democratic office needs to be doing this right away. Right away. Because as we're seeing, a majority of the state houses are controlled by the GOP. We're in for a bloodbath in the 2022 midterms, as anticipated. And because of the way that the Democrats are handling this infrastructure fight. And so, for as long as this is legal, Democrats have to engage in it. Because it's a way to slow the bleeding. Unfortunately, though, as I mentioned, the fact that Republicans do have a disproportionate control on state houses means that this fight will always be tilted in their direction for the foreseeable future, which is why partisan gerrymandering needs to be outlawed. But in the meantime, no unilateral disarmament, no fighting with one hand tied behind your back. So, as you'd say, Matt, it is insufficient, but it is necessary.
Is it more democratic or less? That's the question. And in this case, obviously more.
Obviously more. All right, we are going to read some IMs and get out of here. I lost a bunch of the IMs. I'm so sorry. This is just because I'm doing this on my laptop and not the other computer.
First, a bit of news.
Oh.
I have... Shoot, my phone. Why won't my fingerprint? So I'm trying to unlock my phone and the fingerprint didn't work.
Are you using your left hand?
Yeah, well, it should work. Bolsonaro has been banned from Facebook Live after saying that the COVID-19 vaccine gives you AIDS. So that's where we're at there.
Okay. Canceled.
Yeah, exactly. Free speech. I mean, he's the leader of a government. You're just going to take his free speech away?
I know, right? He has no power anymore.
This
Taking
is really
the voice
scary.
away from the powerless.
This scares me in a way that I haven't been scared by all the attacks on the left speech that just go on as a regular part of life.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the Substack about this one. Maybe a Rumble video. White communists. Emma and Matt have great energy. Good show. It's all me, obviously. Just kidding. Back to George Washington. He ran a slave labor camp in society that was a racial tyranny of human commodification, forced labor, rape, killings, and torture. An enslaved person as a commodity was valued in today's dollars at roughly $30,000, some more, some less. Young women were priced higher for raping.
Yep.
Washington enslaved over 123 people at his death, which would be around $4 million today, not including the value of each lifetime of stolen labor.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. The apologist should be asked to explain the difference between what Americans euphemistically call plantations, i.e., racialized slave labor camps, and the slave labor camps the Nazis copied from America's racial tyranny model that men like Oskar Schindler ran just 68 years after the Civil War. I mean,
yeah.
What an amazing I am. Really appreciate that context. Alvinio Gracias, any criticisms of Christopher Columbus is Italian phobia. I would imagine that's tongue in cheek. Slappy Tubbs. I have a feeling I shouldn't have said that out loud. Ilhan Omar has has put out endorsements for local elections in Minneapolis and St. Paul for school board and mayor. Might be a good strategy for progressive federal representatives to help out down ballot races. That is a great tactic. And once again, she's some of the best the left has to offer in elected government right now. Really cool, fun, half-tastic. Smiley face, yes. Kid tested Politburo approved. Loved watching Fields in college. Great dude. Was hoping he'd be able to sit more as he needed time to adjust and get the ball out quicker. His release is really long. Unfortunate he landed with a bad coach. I know. I mean, I didn't see it in the same way people did coming out of college. Like, I really do think this is why people miss on Justin Herbert, for example. Oh, you know, if you win the national championship, you've got to be the quarterback that comes out first. Like, Tua Tagovailoa, how could he not be better than Justin Herbert? Because, like, even these NFL scouts, they don't, like, it was obvious in college. The way the ball came out of Justin Herbert's hands is so much better than the way it comes out of Tua's hands. And, like, I mean, I think Justin Fields is more talented than Tua, for example, but he won in college at Ohio State, so that's all people can see. And I think it hyped him up a little bit too much. But that said, he's not in a position to succeed because Matt Nagy is such a terrible coach. So I'm rooting for him because he actually seems like a great guy and great leader. But I don't know if I see him as like a top franchise quarterback for a long time. Wayne, nope, not reading that. Democrats could also legislate ranked choice and open primaries to help with gerrymandering, but that would challenge their power. Yeah, I hear you. And the final IM of the day. Neutrino chirality is best. As someone with a BS in physics, I can attest that all it grants you is some special math skills that are useful in a narrow context and a general framework for problem solving. What it does for some, unfortunately, is grant them an ego that like that asshat who feels like saying he has a degree in physics/math auto-qualifies him as a genius at everything. Which is why I cringe when people say, you must be smart to anyone in this field. No, we are people with a knack for mathematics. Yeah. We are superior to anyone, and I hate the way it gives the superiority complex to folks who often find a willing audience. Hashtag left is best. This is what, I mean.
That's what the ruling class values in education.
We've been hammering this. I don't care if anyone's smart. I don't care if anyone is smart. The definition of smart. Dick Cheney was smart. Fucking sociopath. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to me. And smartness is a very, like, classist definition of ability in a capitalist system. You can be smart in a variety of different ways. You can be great technically. You can be great mechanically. You can be a great speaker. You can be a great athlete, which has its own intelligence and like it's an art form in and of itself. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It as Matt said, degrees and smartness and the definition of it as exists is a way for the ruling class to solidify their power and create gatekeeping where you can say, oh, I have this Harvard degree, I have this PhD in this, which is only accessible to certain people. So I mean, I hate it. I hate it. I can't stand having that conversation. Oh, but they're smart. I just had that conversation about, oh, sorry, keep going.
Well, I was just going to say, people say there's like different kinds of smartness too. And I think that like pretty much everybody is capable of any kind of smartness if they were given enough time and leisure to acclimatize themselves to it. Like I pretty much, if you have the motor capabilities, you could play guitar in the Strokes. You could, anchor a nightly news show. Like these skills are stuff that, frankly, it just takes time and repetition and the ability to cultivate it. Now, would you be as good as the very best person? Perhaps not, but you'd be competent.
Yeah.
Like this sort of, and it's exactly what Emma said, which is like, education, unfortunately, in a capitalist society is a privilege laundered into merit.
Yeah, and you mentioned Robert Moses earlier in the show, so this kind of just brings it full circle. I'll wrap it up in a second, but I was just having this debate with a family member about Robert Moses. Like, complicated fella. Really, really smart, though. Really smart. And I'm like, what does that matter? I don't care. What were the like tangible results of his actions? They were racist, and they helped destroy city life, as you mentioned. So anyway, but he's smart. Anyway, a real pet peeve of mine. But with that said, we are going to wrap up today's show. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Please join the Majority Report. Your support is what we need to keep this show going. Majority.fm. Check us out there. Check out Left Reckoning, Matt, and Bradley. Thanks so much for your help today. Sam will be back tomorrow. And for the rest of the week, sans Thursday, where I will be with you solo again. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth